The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 34. Map and Misgivings. The last week of June, 1997. Are you ready?
No. Are you?
No.
Okay then. Let's do this.
Draco swallowed hard. It was time for the final test. After perfecting sending through an apple, a glass of milk, a flower, a worm, a rat, and a niffler, the last of which caused Borgin to send back a howler at the two of them, it was time for the final test, a human. They had flipped a coin to see who would go, after putting aside their wands to avoid interfering with it, and Draco was pleased to see that his wandless magic had improved, slightly. He had called heads, and it was heads, so he would go. He stepped into the cabinet with more bravado than he felt, closing the door behind him. There was a pulling, twisting feeling all over his body. It felt like a portkey, only with a cloying sensation, as though he had a heavy blanket pressed all over his face and body. Then the sensation lifted, and he was staring at the lit rectangle of a door. He pushed and found himself in Borgin and Burke's shop. Borgin was coming from around the counter.
"Excellent! It's done, then?"
"Yes," Draco rasped,
then cleared his throat. "Yes, it's done. Have your owl deliver this to my father."
He forced a note into Borgin's hands.
"You should expect them tomorrow night."
Without another word, Draco turned and stepped back into the cabinet. A handful of seconds, or maybe an eternity, later, he stumbled out of the door and into Hermione's arms. "Are you all right?" she asked frantically. "How was it?"
"No, but it works,"
he answered heavily. His stomach was in knots, not from the method of travel, but from the knowledge of what was to come. She conjured a glass of water and gave it to him. He finished it and vanished the glass, hugging her tight.
"Tell me everything is going to be all right."
"Everything is going to be all right," she said, with as much confidence as she could muster. Draco awoke the next morning with a stomachache. The idea of going through with what they had to do was nearly untenable. Yes, the Order knew of his loyalties, his true role in the situation. However, the majority of their classmates would not learn the truth until, if Voldemort was defeated. If his defeat proved to be impossible, they might never know. The name of Draco Malfoy would go down in the annals of Hogwarts as nothing more than a cold-hearted killer. But it was not just that. By pledging himself as a member of the Order, he was failing to live up to his Malfoy heritage. His father would likely disown him if they both lived. No matter which way he turned, no matter which path he took, someone would hate him. He could barely eat any breakfast. He wasn't alone in that. Across the room at the Gryffindor table, Hermione was struggling as well. Professor McGonagall walked by, stopping in front of his seat.
"Mr. Malfoy, can you see me in my office before your first class? I shall let Professor Flitwick know that you will be late."
Pansy and Blaze and a few others shot him knowing smirks, assuming that he was in trouble.
"Yes, Professor,"
Draco murmured. He gave up on trying to finish his meal, and after determining that Hermione had already left, he hurried up the stairs to McGonagall's office.
"You wish to see me, Professor?"
"Have a seat, Mr. Malfoy," McGonagall said. "Shortbread?"
She held up a tin of biscuits. Draco took one to be polite, but as with breakfast, he struggled with it.
"I asked you here because I know you have misgivings about tonight. You're not only worried about whether or not you can carry out the task laid out for you, you're also worried about what your friends and family might say."
Draco studied his hands and nodded. "No Malfoy has ever broken away from the family like this before." She sighed and took a shortbread biscuit for herself.
"That is true. No Malfoy has ever broken away, as far as I know. However, you must remember that you are not only a Malfoy."
He looked up at her in a moment of brief confusion. Then his visage cleared. "I understand. You mean Sirius, Tonks."
"Among others?"
"Tonks was raised by a Muggle-born father. She was exposed to all of these ideas from a young age. It's second nature for her,"
Draco groused.
"And Sirius was raised by one of the most staunchly pure-blood women I've ever had the misfortune of meeting,"
McGonagall said waspishly.
"Regardless, the two of them are not alone. There have been many Black family members over the years who have forged their own paths. There was Tonks's mother, Andromeda, and your mother's uncle, Alphard. He was your namesake, you know."
He gave her a look of surprise.
"My—"
"Alphard Draco Black. He was a champion of Muggle-born rights in his day. His grandmother, your great-great-grandmother, was one."
If Draco had not been seated, he would have fallen over.
"There are Muggle-borns in my family tree."
"There are Muggle-borns in everyone's family tree. It's just that not every family recognizes them,"
Professor McGonagall said, a little irritably. Draco thought for a moment. Then he began to speak, each sentence more ragged than the last.
"I suppose that makes sense. But what if we do this and it doesn't work? What if Dumbledore actually dies? As is, if we are successful, everyone will think he's dead, and that I killed him. I don't know if I can live with that. I don't know if I will be able to show my face in this school again. There's a high likelihood they'll take me away to Azkaban."
Draco dropped his head in his hands. There was silence from her.
He mumbled, "I'm scared to death, Professor."
"Courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway," Professor McGonagall said. "I heard a wise man say that once. You do realize all of us are scared?"
He raised his head to look at her. He took a deep breath, then another.
"No, I had no idea. At every meeting, everyone seems resolute, like a wall made of iron."
"It's all right to be afraid. I would not want to go into battle with someone who wasn't a little bit afraid."
Professor McGonagall smiled kindly at him.
"But believe me when I say, all of us will do everything we can to keep you from Azkaban. Professor Snape will be with you. If you need him, look to him. Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who need it. Don't forget."
He nodded again, hoping she was right. His stomach growled, and, surprising himself with his hunger, he popped the shortbread into his mouth.
"Thank you for everything, Professor."
She smiled and held out the tin shortbread biscuits.
"Take a few more. It's hours until lunch."
He gave a tentative smile and took a handful, then shouldered his knapsack and headed out the door to the Charms classroom. A few moments later, she answered the soft knock at the door.
"You and Professor Dumbledore, all right. He will not be able to do it when the time comes. He has the courage, but I fear he has too much heart,"
Professor McGonagall said kindly.
Severus nodded. "Dumbledore has asked me to step in when the time comes. It has to be done, whether Draco is able to do it or not."
but the others must see him try."
She sighed deeply and nodded.
"I know. I just wish there was some other way. Something else we could do."
He blinked hard.
"Believe me when I say, not a day goes by that I haven't had that very same thought."
She looked sharply at him.
"Severus, looking back is a bad habit. There's plenty enough to be worried about in the future."
He looked at her for a moment, then nodded.
"Godspeed tonight."
"You as well," she said grimly, turning to look out of the window as the swish of Professor Snape's robes carried him from the room. The night had come. Dumbledore was planning to leave the castle tonight and return to the invading party. As soon as Harry Potter disappeared through the portrait hole from the Gryffindor common room, going to meet Dumbledore, Hermione sat down with Ron and Ginny.
"So Snape is the one who heard of the prophecy, and turned you-know-who onto the Potters? That shit-headed git!" Ron exclaimed in disbelief. "I can't believe the Dumbledore still trusts him, after that."
"He played his part well," Ginny said thoughtfully.
"I mean, we all thought he was on our side last year, when he and the others told us about Hermione's dad acting as a double agent. I just can't believe, this whole time, he's been the one who's the double agent, triple agent, I don't know."
Hermione bit her lip. She knew that if Ginny and Ron were to watch the map as instructed by Harry, they would not only see Death Eaters entering the castle, but her and Draco leading them. If everything went to plan, all of the confusion would be cleared up within a few days or a week at most. But if something were to go awry, if one small piece of the puzzle didn't click into place, everything could fall apart. She had to tell them, at least some of it, if nothing else, so that they would not try to come and save everyone and muck it up. "Listen, I don't have much time. I know Harry is worried about something happening tonight, and he's right. Something is happening. But I need for both of you to trust me when I say that what seems to be happening is not necessarily what is happening. I know that Harry is worried because the school will be vulnerable tonight without Dumbledore, but I need for both of you to trust that Dumbledore knows exactly what is about to happen. He even planned it this way." She looked down at the Marauder's map clutched in Ron's hands. "That map, it's going to have some terrible things on it tonight, but I need for you to understand that it's all under control. I need for you to stay in here and stay safe. Whatever you do, do not alert anyone. Do not bring out Dumbledore's army."
"What the hell are you talking about, Hermione?" Ron asked roughly. "What do you know? Are you and Malfoy up to something?"
"Yes. We are working with Professor Dumbledore and Lupin and a few others, but it's important that Harry does not know about it until he goes home to the Dursleys. I know it's hard to keep secrets. Believe me, after this year, I really do know. But you only need to keep this from him for a few days. Please, if you're at all worried, just watch the Whomping Willow on the map, yes?" The Ginger Witch and Wizard stared at her with just a tiny bit of hostility before agreeing. She knew it was difficult for Ronald to trust Draco. Their families had a history of bad blood long before the two of them entered Hogwarts. But both of them needed to trust that this was for the best. She plunged ahead with what she had to say. It was important that she get everything out, and she didn't have much time. "I need a favor. When you leave school next week to go home for the summer, please take Houdini with you, and any of my clothes and things that I left behind." She knew it would be suspicious to her dormitory mates
if she had packed everything she owned as though to leave tonight, nearly a week before the end of term. And taking Houdini and her beaded bag might be dangerous for the sweet ferret.
"Hermione," Ginny said, "you're scaring me. What the hell is going on?"
She sighed heavily. "Please, don't let it worry you. This summer, after you go home, you're going to visit a house in London. According to my father, your parents have been there several times before. Bring Houdini and my things there, and everything will make sense. I hope," she added silently.
Jenny looked as though she was seriously considering telling Hermione that she and her ferret could step right off if Hermione was going to keep secrets from her. But in the end, she relented. "I'll bring him."
"Thank you. I've got to go. Remember, whatever you see on the map, do not come and help. And above all, do not tell Harry what you see. He will learn all of it very soon." The two Weasleys nodded reluctantly and watched as Hermione left the Gryffindor common room. It was with great effort that she did not look around the room to say goodbye to it. She knew that it was entirely possible that she might never set foot in this room again. Just outside the portrait hall, she met Professor McGonagall.
"Ready?"
the professor asked. Hermione only nodded. She wasn't sure she could trust her voice at the moment.
"You're doing the right thing, Miss Granger. I know that keeping secrets doesn't feel very good, but it is important. There will be people at the funeral, and they will be watching him. If Potter acts as though everything is all right—"
"I know, Professor. I just hate how we're having to go about this." They walked quickly to the 6th floor, locating the dancing troll's tapestry. Hermione whispered to herself, walking back and forth 3 times in front of the tapestry. A door opened in the wall, and after receiving a last encouraging look from Professor McGonagall, she went inside.
"Watcher, Draco!"
Tonks's soft voice stopped him as he rounded the stairs from the dungeon and entered the back of the entrance hall.
"Thought I'd walk with you, if that's all right."
"Of course," Draco said, acutely aware that this was the first time he had been alone with his cousin.
"Nymphadora, please. Tonks. Or Dora, if you must."
"Dora." He started again, then attempted a smile. "Tonks. This summer, you met with my mother and Linda Granger in a park in London, is that right?"
Tonks sucked in a breath. "You recognized me that day?"
"No, I didn't. When we met here at Hogwarts in Professor Dumbledore's office, you looked different, so it didn't cross my mind. But then I noticed that you looked different at every meeting. I thought maybe you just enjoyed transfiguring yourself, like you were really good at it and liked to stay in practice or something." She nodded. "But then, during the meeting in which Professor Lupin suggested that someone else confront us after we exit the room of requirement, your hair went from aquamarine to an angry orangey red, and it didn't seem like it was on purpose, or like you thought about it. It just did. That's when I realized we must have seen you that day." Tonks nodded, but said nothing. She could tell he had more to say on the subject. "Were you meeting my mother? Trying to convince her to join the Order?"
"On the contrary, your mother approached the Order long before that day,"
Tonks answered. "What?" The shock on Draco's face was apparent.
"Tell me, Draco, have you ever heard your mother use the word mudblood?"
she asked. He thought about it for a moment, then finally answered, "No."
"Has she ever talked about the superiority of purebloods, or that she believes that Muggles are dirty?"
"No," he said, with more conviction this time.
"Narcissa married her husband young. Not much older than you are now, in fact. She didn't have everything figured out, I suppose. None of us do, really." Well, maybe Dumbledore, she said, and they laughed.
You think if she'd married someone else, she wouldn't have chosen this pureblood supremacy life? Draco asked.
I don't just think it. I know it.
Draco nodded in thought. They were to the 5th floor now, only 1 floor away from the 6th floor room of requirement. One more question. How does Linda Granger fit into all of this? At this, Tonks's steps faltered.
She's not a double agent, like Richard, if that's what you're wondering. But she knows what's going on, or at least enough of it. And she has vowed to help. But Draco...
At this, Tonks stopped walking and turned to face him.
Richard Granger does not know about Linda, and Linda does not know about Richard. He's trying to protect her. It goes deeper than just this situation with Voldemort. I don't want to say more, but it's their life, their secrets. They aren't ours to share. And Linda does not want Hermione to know either, so please don't say anything.
Why not? Tonks raised one eyebrow at him.
Are you thrilled that Narcissa is risking her neck to go against Lucius and Voldemort?
Merlin, no. I'd rather she take a portkey to the summer house in Monte Carlo. Just ride this whole thing out there.
Tonks nodded. Now, imagine that your mother is a Muggle with no magical powers at all.
Draco sighed, and leaned back on the banister next to him. She thinks Hermione will try and talk her out of it.
Right in one, Tonks said with a small smile. Come on, it's almost time.
They hurried up the final flight of stairs, where Professor McGonagall was waiting.
She's already inside. Remember, I will be on the 7th floor, patrolling, and Nymphadora will be on the landing below the astronomy tower. We will put up a convincing fight,
the professor said, raising an eyebrow in determination. You have your potions? Draco asked anxiously. Now that the time was close, he was getting nervous that something was being forgotten.
Both women nodded. Go, Draco. We will see you soon. Good luck.
They watched him call for the room of hidden things and disappear inside. Tonks turned to her former professor.
Bottoms up, I say.
Each of them withdrew a tiny vial of golden liquid, recently nicked from the potion storage cupboard of Professor Slughorn.
Cheers,
said Tonks, raising her vial.
To our good health,
McGonagall responded, clinking glass with the younger witch. They drank the vials empty, then vanished them. Without another word, they set off for their stations.
Chapter 35. Bullets and Battles. The inside of the vanishing cabinet glowed with an eerie greenish-purple light. Then the door was pushed open roughly. Bellatrix Lestrange was the first to emerge.
"How ghastly!" she said,
staring around the room of hidden things. It was, truthfully, rather ghastly. The things that had been banished here were all broken, obsolete, hopelessly out of date or useless. It was a cathedral of junk, which seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Behind her came a witch and wizard who seemed to take the greatest pleasure in annoying each other. The Carrows, a brother and sister who only stopped harassing other people long enough to harass each other, were apparently resuming an argument that had started back in Borgin and Burke's shop.
"I tell you, Lecto, that was Mum's tea set. The one what sign said it killed 17 muggles. I'm willing to bet that old man Burke nicked it from her. Might just have to nick it back when we leave tonight." "Shut your fucking pie hole, Amicus. You couldn't even steal a venereal disease. Besides, Mum still has that old tea set." "Why don't she ever use it then, huh?"
Amicus Carrow asked his sister triumphantly, as though he had just won the argument.
'Cause Mum ain't got no friends, you wagger, Alecto said uncharitably. That's where you get it from. You ain't got no friends either. Take it back, you smelly bit, Amicus said, reaching towards his taller sister to pull her down into a headlock. If the two of you could resume this another time, we'd all greatly appreciate it. Behind Alecto Caro, a tall, thick-set man pushed past the two of them. Roll, he said by way of introduction to Draco and Hermione. This here is Gibbon, and you've met the Carrows. Roll jerked his thumb back to the siblings in disgust. And I'm Richard, said the man behind Gibbon, emerging from the vanishing cabinet. Dad! Hermione rushed to him, at once so relieved and yet so afraid to see him there, even though she was expecting it. She hugged him hard, then wondered briefly if the others might find it odd, but surely even Death-Eaters hugged their children. Save the cosy catch-up for later, came a growling voice behind Richard. Hermione noticed the change in her father's expression almost instantly. This is a late addition to our group, he explained to Draco and Hermione. He was at Malfoy Manor when we were leaving, and insisted that he come along. Draco and Hermione struggled to control the fear on their faces at the sight of Fenrir Greyback. When I heard there was a trip to Hogwarts planned, I couldn't say no, the werewolf said, grinning wildly, showing off his spectacular teeth. You weren't exactly asked, Richard Granger said, causing Hermione's anxiety levels to spike. Surely her father knew what this man was, and knew not to antagonize him. Dad, she whispered, but Richard shushed her gently. Are we ready? Asked Richard to the group, knowing that there was a tight schedule to keep. You think you're in charge? Came the annoyed voice of Bellatrix. Actually, I think Draco and Hermione are in charge. It is their assignment, after all. Richard answered her. Bellatrix pursed her lips, but said nothing. Richard nodded encouragingly at Draco and his daughter. Right, Draco said thinly. He cleared his throat and tried again. Right, let's go. It had been a surprise to Richard earlier that evening when he arrived with Lucius to find their usual team that they had prepared with, plus one more. It had been evident from the beginning what the man was. Richard, before you go, may I have a word? Lucius said urgently. You can play kissy face later, Lucy. We need to be going, Bellatrix said in her grating voice. It will only take a moment, Bellatrix, Lucius bit out, leading Richard to the conservatory, seeing as his study had been taken over by Voldemort. When the two men were alone, Lucius turned to Richard. Richard felt the wet blanket sensation that he had first experienced with Lupin in that church, many months before. A muffling charm, he knew now. With an odd sense of déjà vu, Richard peered into the eyes of the blonde wizard. Lupin had done that in a moment of truth. What was Lucius about to say that he didn't want overheard? I didn't know Greyback would be going. I asked the Dark Lord to reconsider, but he would not. The problem is Greyback prefers children. You will be arriving there late, after curfew. The only children around will be ours. Lucius seemed agitated. From far away came the sounds of raucous laughter, as the group shared a pre-mission celebratory drink. I'll do what I can to protect them, Richard assured Lucius, but let me ask you, in the Muggle world, legend has it that a werewolf can be killed by a silver bullet. Is that the case in the wizarding world? Lucius hesitated. I confess,
I don't know. I have heard that silver is said to weaken them, but I don't know what a bullet is."
Richard reached into his shoulder holster and removed the Walther PPK, ejecting the magazine.
"This is a gun. Inside of here,"
he indicated the magazine clip in his other hand,
"are bullets. The gun shoots the bullet the way a wand shoots a spell. Instead of just waving it, though, you push this little button and then pull this little thing here. It's called the trigger. But these bullets are made of steel. Can you change them to silver?"
Lucius tapped the clip with his wand.
"Argentus," he said urgently.
In Richard's hand, the magazine turned warm, then back to cool. In the clip's holes that indicated how full it was, Richard could just make out a slight difference to the bullets. He reloaded the gun and reholstered it.
"Thanks, Lucius. I'll let you know how it goes."
He turned to leave.
"Richard!"
Lucius called after him, then closed his mouth as though he did not intend to speak.
"What is it?"
Lucius took a deep breath and looked away as though it pained him to say it.
I hope that you return unharmed."
"Ah, geez. Okay, then,"
Richard had said, with a wry smile. Now, as the 9 of them crept down the corridor, Richard had to hope that luck would be on their sides tonight. Everything had been planned, he knew, as he had been part of much of the planning on both sides of this battle tonight. But Bellatrix was unpredictable at the best of times, and adding in the volatility of a werewolf did not help matters. Hermione took the lead, followed by Draco, Bellatrix, the Carrows, Roll, Gibbon, Greyback, then Richard. Though he would have preferred to be close to Hermione and Draco, he also wanted to keep an eye on the werewolf.
"There is fresh blood nearby,"
Richard heard the werewolf say almost to himself. He needed a distraction.
"Say, Fenrir, is it? I've often wondered, with that many extra teeth, do you still take the time to floss nightly?"
The low growl of the werewolf stopped, and the beast turned to look at him, tilting his head a bit in confusion.
"What did you say to me, Muggle?"
"Just wondering if the extra teeth create extra work when it comes to brushing and flossing. Do you use fluoride toothpaste?"
After a moment's agitation, the werewolf seemed to feel that the Muggle man was too stupid to waste too much of his foul breath on.
"No."
"You should consider switching. 4 out of 5 vampires recommend it."
The werewolf turned back in agitation, but Richard was glad to see that he no longer appeared to be scenting fresh blood. He knew they should be expecting Professor McGonagall at any moment.
"Students out of bed! Students in the corridors!"
An unknown voice cackled up ahead. There was muttering, then a jet of red light shot out from a wand, followed by a small scream and a muffled thump. The scream sounded like Hermione, and Richard ran ahead to see what had happened. Slumped on the ground was a man in grey and black robes, his stringy grey hair fanning out from his mottled face as he lay on the ground.
"It's nothing. She's just stunned him,"
Hermione reassured her father, as he wordlessly asked what had happened.
"Filch, the caretaker."
"I always hated that old Thestral's arse,"
Bellatrix said with a proud grin.
"Let's focus on the task, Bellatrix,"
Richard said harshly, and they proceeded. As he passed the stunned man, Richard tried to take note of whether or not he was breathing. By now, a mangy-looking cat with bulging eyes had come and was kneading the man's chest with her paws. From ahead, Richard heard Minerva McGonagall asking Draco and Hermione where they thought they were going.
"We have business here tonight,"
Draco said loudly.
"I see. And it appears that you've brought a few of your business associates, Mr. Malfoy, Miss Granger."
the older witch said sternly.
"Please, stand aside, Professor McGonagall,"
Hermione said, fighting to keep her voice steady.
"You should not be here. None of you should be here."
The woman's voice rebounded around the corridor, and Richard saw Roll raise his wand. He pushed Gibbon into Roll, causing the wizard to misfire, and the purple jet of light to burn a small hole in the stone wall above the professor. Gibbon looked angrily at Richard, but Richard jerked his head towards Greyback, as if to say it was him. Gibbon's eyes grew huge, and he turned away quickly. But now others had joined the fight against the professor. Bellatrix and the carers were firing at will. Thankfully, whatever potion the older witch had taken seemed to be working. Several of McGonagall's curses landed on her assailants. Meanwhile, the onslaught of spells aimed at her collided with each other and fizzled, or else sailed far too wide or short. Draco and Hermione fired badly on purpose. Finally, McGonagall hurried away up the opposite corridor, and Richard took the opportunity to call to the rest of them.
"Let's hurry up, before she comes back with others. Draco, lead the way to the tower."
At the next landing they met Tonks, and a similar battle ensued. She put up a fierce fight, but eventually retreated as well.
"That seemed almost too easy,"
Bellatrix mused as they hurried up the stairs to the top of the astronomy tower.
"Snape told the extra Aurors to take the night off,"
Draco explained. This seemed to mollify his aunt.
"He already set off the Dark Mark just a little while ago, so hopefully Dumbledore will be inclined to hurry back."
At these words, Draco shoved open the door to the astronomy tower landing, and stopped short. Through the tangle of people ahead of him, Richard Granger could just make out the half-moon spectacles of Albus Dumbledore. To call the earlier events of the evening arduous for Harry Potter would be an understatement. Dumbledore had summoned Harry at dinner, urging him to come as soon as he could to the headmaster's office. Harry had run straight from the Great Hall, quite literally bumping into Sybil Trelawney on the way. It was during this encounter that he learned that it was Professor Snape who had alerted Voldemort to the prophecy. All those years before, Professor Snape, who had ultimately been responsible for his parents' deaths. Inside, he seethed. What kind of fool was Dumbledore to allow this man to teach? To think that this man was trustworthy in any way? Before he and Dumbledore had set off, it had burst from him. Dumbledore had offered excuses, platitudes, but nothing that the headmaster had to say could change Harry's mind. Severus Snape was a bastard, through and through. The task that they left the castle to complete had been so much worse than anything Harry had expected. He knew that hunting Horcruxes would not be easy work, but the cave, the boat, the potion, the inferi. It was certain to be the stuff of nightmares for months, if not years, to come. And when they had returned to Hogsmeade and seen the Dark Mark in the sky, the despair that threatened to overtake Harry felt all-consuming. They had borrowed a broom, and Harry had supported the weakened headmaster as they flew to the astronomy tower. "Harry, under your cloak, there, in the corner. You must hide." Dumbledore wheezed at him. "Sir, I need to fight." But Dumbledore quelled him with a look. "Harry, you promised me you would obey me, no matter what. Stay under the cloak." There were footsteps now on the stairs below, and Harry strained his ears to listen. A wizard's voice which seemed familiar, though he couldn't place it exactly, muffled as it was by the door. Harry stared at the door, then turned back in confusion to Dumbledore. Dumbledore was pointing his wand at Harry, and his body suddenly went rigid. Just as Harry was realizing what the professor must have done, Dumbledore tossed his wand at Harry's feet and turned
to the opening door.
"Ah, Draco, out for a stroll this fine night, and Miss Granger as well?"
Dumbledore asked. As the rest of the group trooped in, his demeanour changed.
"Oh, not a romantic walk along the parapets, then?"
"No," Draco said, and Hermione was glad to hear that the waver in his voice was nearly indetectable. This had to work, she thought. Behind her, she felt her father step close to her and briefly touch her fingers. She grabbed back tightly and squeezed, then let go.
"I see. Well, it appears that the two of you have been promoted in your Dark Lord's army."
"We've been given a job, a task we must carry out,"
Hermione said, forcing her voice to stay steady.
"Well, my dear, am I to assume that I am a part of this task?" "Oh, Dumby! Always was one step ahead!" cackled Amicus Carrow. "But this time, you's outnumbered 9-1, idjit!" "Amicus, your elocution is outstripped only by your sister's manners,"
Dumbledore said kindly, as Alecto spat thickly onto the ground.
"And who else do we have? Ah, Bellatrix, of course. Charmed, as always." "I've been waiting for this day for many years, Dumbledore," the insane witch laughed. "And Roll, Gibbon, I never expected the two of you to darken the door of an institution of learning again."
The two men made threatening grunts in the headmaster's direction.
"And is that you, Fenrir?"
There was a low rumble from somewhere behind Hermione. She flinched.
"Not even waiting until the full moon to transform, I see,"
Professor Dumbledore said, not even trying to keep the tinge of disgust from his voice.
"And lastly, yes, Richard Granger. I remember the stories about you from Mad Eye back in the day." "Yes, I fought Moody several times over the years," Richard said, delivering his line perfectly. "He will be sorry to have missed you," Dumbledore said. "And now that we have all become reacquainted, tell me more about this task, Miss Granger."
In the end, even knowing that it was entirely fake proved to be too difficult for Draco. Hermione had tried to raise her own wand, but it too wavered horribly. Still, she worried. What if one of the actual Death Eaters got anxious and did it for themselves? When the door had burst open behind them, revealing the hulking shape of Severus Snape, Hermione had breathed a small sigh of relief. The professor stepped forward, raising his wand.
"Avada Kedavra,"
he said, in a garbled voice, and a moment later a bolt of green light shot from the tip of his wand. The headmaster flew up into the air and disappeared over the ramparts, ostensibly crashing to the ground below. Dead. Hermione stifled a scream, and Draco caught one of her hands and pulled it around him, encircling her body with his arm.
"We need to go. Quickly. The Aurors are on their way,"
Snape called to the others. The 10 of them hurried down the stairs, crossing the landing quickly, and down 2 more flights. As they rounded the corner of the 6th floor, near the room of requirement, jets of red light fired into their midst. No one could see the assailants, but Hermione knew it to be Professor McGonagall. As she watched, a spell hit Gibbon in the leg, and the gash began bleeding profusely. Another hit Greyback in the mouth, and the werewolf's high-pitched cries split the air.
"Let's hurry!"
she called to the others, hoping to get them inside the room before any of them could fire back. 30 seconds later, they had disappeared through the vanishing cabinet, gone from Hogwarts.
Chapter 36. Orthodontics and Obfuscations. After the force of Snape's spell hit him, Dumbledore flew up into the air, trusting completely in his comrades. After only a second or two of falling, his velocity slowed considerably, and in a moment it felt as though he had landed on a pillow of air. "Are you all right?" The searching blue eyes of Remus Lupin loomed over him.
"I'm fine. Well, as good as to be expected. A bit tired from before. Harry and I had to... It was very difficult."
Dumbledore could hear the rambling weakness in his own voice.
"I'm going to help you up. We have to hurry," Remus said urgently. "Sirius, are you ready?"
From next to Remus, an exact copy of Dumbledore swam into sight.
"Yes, go ahead and stun me."
Remus helped Dumbledore up, and Sirius laid down in his place, arranging his limbs, just so.
"Stupefy,"
Remus said forcefully, pointing his wand at the wizard on the ground.
"Remus, what's taking so long?"
Tonks's voice called, quiet but urgent, only a short distance away.
"The Professor is weak. We're going to have to work together to get him to the Shrieking Shack, to disapparate," Remus said urgently. "You may need to take him directly to St. Mungo's."
"No,
that will ruin everything. I must stay out of public sight, Remus, you know that," wheezed Dumbledore. "But you need a doctor, Albus." Dumbledore looked at Tonks. "I believe you know of someone, Nymphadora?"
She nodded quickly.
"Remus, stay here with Sirius like we planned. He will need some help, especially once the body is found,"
Tonks said urgently. Already the doors of the castle were opening, and curious students who had noticed the green flash of light and the green dark mark in the sky were spilling into the grounds. Tonks disillusioned herself and Dumbledore, making their way to the Whomping Willow. She levitated the weakened headmaster through the tunnel carefully, emerging after only a bit of difficulty in the Shrieking Shack. Professor McGonagall hurried up the stairs to the astronomy tower.
"Venite incantatem!"
"Professor, it was Snape, and Hermione, and Draco, they—"
Harry was yanking off the invisibility cloak and gathering up his wand and that of Dumbledore's.
"They killed—"
And a bubble of emotion tore through Harry's throat. He struggled to push past his head of house, eager to go after them, to exact punishment.
Potter, it's all right."
"It's not, Professor. They killed him. They—"
"Potter, quit struggling. You may be stronger than me, but believe me, I know more spells than you," McGonagall said irritably. "Professor Snape, Mr. Malfoy, and Miss Granger are gone."
Harry fell back down onto the ground in shock.
"Hermione, her father, Draco, we trusted them. And Snape! Professor, Severus Snape was never on our side. He's the one that performed the Avada—"
"I know, Harry. I'm so sorry you had to witness it,"
Professor McGonagall said, and she meant it.
"I'll have someone get you to the infirmary for a sleeping draught."
"You don't know! Professor, I'm fine. I just need to go after—"
"No, you don't, Potter," she said sternly. "You only need to calm your mind. Practice your occlumency."
He stared, wide-eyed at her for a moment, then dropped his head in his hands.
"This is all so fucked," he moaned.
His body slumped back against the wall as his legs gave out, and he slid down the wall gracelessly.
"Language, Potter."
McGonagall settled beside him, withdrawing a biscuit tin from her pocket. The outside of the tin had been heavily dented by one of the near-miss spells fired at her.
"But yes, your assessment is correct. Ginger Newt."
Harry fumbled inside the tin and withdrew a small stack of the biscuits.
"Creature!"
Tonks called as soon as she and Dumbledore crossed the threshold of 12 Grimmauld Place. The elf popped in front of her with a beady-eyed look.
"I need for you to make up a bed here on the ground floor. In the living room, quickly.
The elf nodded silently and popped away. Next, Tonks took out her mobile phone and pressed a few buttons. As the other end of the call rang, she chivied Dumbledore to the newly made-up bed in the living room. "Hi, it's Dora. I need your help. Get your medical bag. I'll be there in 1 minute." She hung up swiftly. "Your mother?" Dumbledore asked through laboured breaths. "No, she and Dad are in Canada on holiday, but I have someone else that can help. I'll be right back." Tonks hurried to the front stoop and spun on the spot. Professors Vector and Sprout kept everyone at bay, while Flitwick conjured a blanket to cover Sirius's polyjuiced body. "Have you seen Minerva?" Lupin asked Pomona Sprout, but she just shook her head sorrowfully. In the haze of shock and grief, no one thought to question why Lupin was there.
"Make way, please, make way!"
came the no-nonsense voice of Professor McGonagall from behind him. Gratefully, Remus rushed to her, offering her the hug of a fellow griever, so that they could talk without being overheard. "It's been 25 minutes or so. The polyjuice is good for a while, but he may stir at any moment from the stunning spell. I don't dare stun him again in front of all these people." They had originally wanted to use the draught of living death, but Snape thought that it might not mix well with some of the ingredients from polyjuice. Professor McGonagall spotted Hagrid in the crowd, sobbing uncontrollably.
"Oh, Hagrid! Can you carry Professor Dumbledore's body inside? The room just off the Great Hall," she instructed.
Hagrid sobbed and blew his nose into a tablecloth-sized handkerchief, but he nodded and dutifully gathered the covered body to bring inside. Remus and Minerva followed, watching worriedly as Hagrid settled the body on a low divan.
"Hagrid, would you mind looking in on the Gryffindors? Get everyone back to their common rooms if you can. Then ask the other heads of house to meet us in the headmaster's office in 1 hour. Professor Slughorn can stand in for Snape."
Hagrid nodded tearfully and lumbered out.
"Harry was rather upset. I feel miserable not being able to tell him. But if he appears unaffected at the funeral—"
Professor McGonagall began. Remus nodded sympathetically. On the low sofa in front of the fireplace, Sirius roused slowly.
"Did it work? Are they gone?"
Remus turned to his old friend. "Yes, it's done. Tonks has Albus, and the Death Eaters left without incident."
"Right, perfect. Minerva, you're going up to meet the heads of house soon?"
"Yes, I will push for the funeral to be held in 2 days, without public viewing. It's the earliest I think we can have it. There may be a few, however, who will insist upon seeing the body, Sirius. You should have plenty of polyjuice, yes? Remus, will you stay with him tonight to keep vigil?"
Remus nodded.
"All right. Ward the doors after I leave. I shall check on you both in the morning. Dumbledore's painting won't have appeared on the wall in the headmaster's office, as he's not actually dead, so I'll need to remedy that now. Luckily, most newly deceased painting subjects sleep for a few weeks, so perhaps no one will think it odd when it doesn't speak yet."
"I imagine it will be one of the least odd things about tonight,"
Sirius said sadly. His skin began to bubble as his transformation back to his normal appearance began. McGonagall pushed back her hair from where it had begun to fall from her bun.
"I believe the phrase Potter used earlier tonight sums this up all too well. This is all so fucked."
"Agreed," murmured Remus. The 10 of them crowded into the small, darkened shop in Nocturne Alley, trying not to bump into the dark artifacts on display. Severus Snape raised his wand to heal the gash on Gibbon's leg.
"Roll, Gibbon. Both of you performed well. Amicus, Alecto, Greyback. You all as well. You may all return directly to your homes." "What about my mouth?"
Greyback said angrily, bloody foam flying from his lips.
"Stupid bitch got me in the teeth!"
He dropped his thickly finger-nailed hand to show the damage to his jaw and teeth.
"Ah, that's animal cruelty, that is,"
Richard Granger said with an appraising way, assessing the werewolf's teeth. Greyback made as though to lunge at him furiously, but Snape's rapid shield charm forced him backwards.
"Hold still. I can fix that. And for the record," he said, "enamel, as in teeth."
With the jagged teeth restored, and his jaw healed, Greyback moved to follow the other four where they had disappeared into the flue, but not before giving one final growling menace in the direction of Richard Granger. Once they had gone, Snape looked menacingly at Richard. "The next time you wish to make an asinine joke towards a werewolf, I shall let him bite you."
"Well, thanks for your help tonight,"
Richard said, offering his hand for Snape to shake. Snape inhaled slowly and exhaled even slower. Bellatrix watched the entire interaction with bored fascination.
"You two seem to know each other fairly well, considering that you only met tonight." "Oh, no, I know Severus from years before. We've had missions together in the past," Richard offered. "Really? Which ones?"
Bellatrix asked eagerly.
"Bella, you know that the Dark Lord swears his followers to secrecy concerning missions. I should not need to remind you of that,"
Snape said bitingly. She sneered at him in answer, then took a pinch of flue powder and tossed it into the grate.
"Malfoy Manor!"
Now that it was only the four of them, Draco turned quickly to Snape. "Do you know if Dumbledore—" But at the Professor's panicked look, he stopped.
"Mr. Malfoy, as you and Miss Granger are still under age to apparate, I shall accompany you both to your homes. Shall we take the Grangers first?"
Snape asked pointedly. While this was untrue, as both Draco and Hermione were already 17, Draco realized his mistake quickly. Borgin was watching the group from the shadows.
"Of course, Professor."
"Sorry if this hurts a bit. I'm sure there's a spell or something that does this more easily, but I'm afraid that even if I knew what it was, it would be of no use to me,"
Linda said ruefully to Albus Dumbledore, as she checked his blood sugar levels.
"Nonsense. On the contrary, I often find the Muggle way of doing things to be quite thorough,"
Dumbledore said through pale but smiling lips.
"Your blood sugar's a little low, but nothing that a few sweets won't solve,"
Linda said, checking the readout from the blood sugar monitor. Dumbledore waved a hand and wandlessly conjured a handful of lemon sherbets.
"Want one?" "No, thanks," Linda said with a smile. "Now, with this fever and your swollen glands and tongue, it seems you're either having an allergic reaction of some sort, or a kind of immune response. Did you ingest anything out of the ordinary today?"
"I did, in fact. It was an unknown potion, very potent."
Linda frowned. "I generally recommend against people going around drinking unknown potions," she admonished.
"A fair point," agreed Dumbledore, "although, in my defense, it was a necessary evil."
Well, to be safe, perhaps an antihistamine and a corticosteroid. I don't wish to be alarmist, but at your age I would prefer to be more safe than sorry."
She withdrew the medication from her bag, measuring out doses and shaking out the tablets, and filling a fresh glass of water with the silver pitcher from the table.
"Just do me a favour. Don't go trying that new fixer elixir I've been seeing adverts for. It looks a bit dodgy."
"I quite agree. It does seem dodgy,"
said Dumbledore, returning her smile and dutifully taking the medication that she offered. They were interrupted by a rush of light that swept into the room. It formed itself into the shape of a beautiful, dazzling silver deer. "We are all safe," the deer said, in a steady, deep voice, at odds with the delicate doe's features. "Excellent," Dumbledore said without explanation, raising his own wand to conjure a ball of silver light himself. "I am pleased to hear it. I am safe as well." Dumbledore turned back to the confused Linda Granger. "And now that you have provided such a kind service to me, Dr. Granger, I feel it only right to tell you a bit about what happened tonight, as it concerns you as well." "What do you mean?" Linda asked, confused. "Last summer, your daughter and her friend Draco were asked by Lord Voldemort to carry out the most heinous and unforgivable of crimes. To put it simply, they were instructed to murder me," Dumbledore said. In Linda's shock, she nearly slipped off the edge of the sofa. "What? How?" "Do not fear. As you can tell, they did not, in fact, carry out the deed. Rather, they called upon maturity beyond their years, and came to me for help instead. Together with a handful of others, including Nymphadora here, Draco and Hermione and I brought off quite an elaborate plan that guarantees the children's safety. You see, we have faked my death, so that it appears to Lord Voldemort that they have been successful. He will not punish them." As Dumbledore spoke, quick tears sprang to Linda's eyes. This, then, had been the thing Voldemort had discussed with them at the reception last year. Her heart broke for her daughter and Draco, knowing that they'd had to live with this burden weighing on them for months. "To that end, I must ask a favour of you," Dumbledore continued. "Anything?" Linda whispered. "When you see Hermione and Draco, please do not mention our encounter here tonight. Neither of them asked for this assignment from Lord Voldemort. If they wish to tell you about this, please don't offer them judgment." After a moment, Linda nodded. "Only if you will do the same for me." Dumbledore looked at her, prompting her to go on. "If Hermione or Richard knew that I was involving myself in anything like this, they would be distraught. Hermione would never forgive herself for bringing me into this situation, even though it was my decision to get involved." "I understand," Dumbledore said a bit sorrowfully. "We do a great many things to protect the ones we love. We only have to hope that it is enough." Draco and Hermione were followed by Richard and Snape through the flue into the Granger living room. Without a word, the young witch and wizard fell into each other's arms, the emotions of the evening catching up with them both. Draco turned to Snape. "Do we know if Dumbledore is safe?" Without a word, Snape raised his wand and conjured a Patronus, simply saying to it, "We are all safe." Richard, who looked equally relieved as the others that they were back in familiar territory, chuckled shakily. "That's pretty handy. It saves a lot on mobile charges, I suppose." Snape did not answer. After a moment, another ball of light, this one shaped like a large bird, flew through the wall of the living room and spoke in Dumbledore's voice. "I am pleased to hear it. I am safe as well." "Ah, geez! How neat is that? His light thing looks just like his pet bird," Richard said in wonder.
"Witches and wizards often have animals unique to them for their Patronus,"
Hermione explained.
Richard nodded thoughtfully. "Well, that's just great. Gee, I wonder what mine would be." "A horsefly," Snape answered with no hesitation. "Okie dokie," Richard said with a little smile.
Snape stared flintily at the two teenagers before speaking. "I must impress upon the two of you to speak to no one about this. The Dark Lord will summon the two of you when he deems fit. It likely will be soon."
Draco turned to Hermione. "I'll see you soon, yeah?" She nodded, placing a slow kiss on his cheek.
"We must go, Draco. I'm not certain where Mrs. Granger is, but it is best if we are gone when she returns," Snape said.
Draco took a deep breath and gave Hermione a final hug, then shook Richard's hand in parting. 10 minutes later, the front door opened and Linda Granger stepped inside, her medical bag concealed inside of her rolled yoga mat.
"Mum!"
Hermione flew at her mother, throwing her arms around her. Linda did not miss the red puffiness of her daughter's features, but she chose to ignore it.
"Hermione, darling, what a surprise! We didn't expect you home for a few more days. Did you not take the train?"
No. Term ended. It ended a bit sooner than expected, and rather than waiting around for the train, I asked to come home early," Hermione supplied. Linda decided that she could ignore her daughter's tearful eyes no longer.
"Is everything all right, love?"
"Yes," Hermione answered. "At least for tonight."
Thank you for listening to The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. If you enjoyed this and would like to listen to more, please subscribe to me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts at Silver and Copper, or search Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.